In this presentation, we will create a purchase order. As we create the purchase order, we'll be setting up a new inventory item within the process of setting up the purchase order within QuickBooks Pro 2020, QuickBooks Desktop 2020. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by selecting the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. At this point, we're going to be up in the vendor section. We're purchasing inventory, so we're thinking about the inventory purchasing process. As we go through that, the first step in the ordering, as we can see here, is the purchase order. Remember, purchase order is a bit different, bit confusing, a bit different than we think of in when we purchase something personally, or even small businesses purchase something, in that when we make the purchase order, we're not either making a payment or receiving the inventory. We expect to be receiving the inventory by shipment, then making the payment. And that's because we have leverage in order to do it in that way. And therefore, the purchase order, although we're going to track the purchase order to see the inventory that we have requested, is not going to result in any financial transaction. There's no inventory that has been received yet. There's no money that has changed hands. There's no liability yet because we don't know credit card, nothing. At the point in time that we purchase the purchase order, it is just a request. Now, as we do this, what we're going to do in this purchase order, the imagination, what we got here in our storyboard here is we're saying someone came into our store, our guitar store. We sell guitars. They look over our guitars. They say, hey, I'd like a Fender type of guitar. And we're like, okay, a Fender. We don't have any Fenders in the shop, but we can order you a Fender. And so we'll set up possibly a new vendor, Fender, the new vendor. It kind of rhymes there, but Fender, the new vendor, will set them up, and then we'll purchase that inventory item for you. And then once it gets here, we will make the purchase order. So, we will make the invoice for you. So in other words, they came into the shop. We wanted to make them a sale in the shop, which would probably be a sales receipt. They want a guitar that's not in our shop. Therefore, we say, hey, we'll get to that new vendor. We'll purchase it for you. So we're going to go up to the purchasing process, purchase from the vendor, which will be Fender, and then once we get it, then we can create the invoice and invoice the client. As we do that, we're going to have to set up a new inventory item. Let's do it. We're going to create the purchase order. Purchase order, new vendor, which we're going to call Fender. Fender sells guitars. Fender's a type of guitar, and so we're going to say it's Fender. It's going to be our new vendor. And it's obviously we don't have them yet, so I'm going to type it in there and then say tab. Then it's going to say, hey, do you want to set up the vendor? And we're going to say yes. I'm paraphrasing. So we're going to say quick add instead of the full setup because we've seen that in the past, and I don't want to bore you with the full setup process. So we're going to be then tabbing through this. The date we're going to be using is 020920. Invoice number generating automatically, which is what we want. And then we're going to create the item. Now, obviously, we don't have an item yet for Fender because it is a new vendor. Fender's a new vendor. So we're going to put in an item here. We're going to say the item, and I'm just going to type in the item, and then we'll set it up. So we're going to type in, then the item is going to be an SQ, we're going to call it. An SQ is not there, so I'm just going to say tab. And it's gonna ask, do you want to set that up? And we're gonna say, yes, we do. We want to set up the new item. The item will be an inventory part, so we're gonna be setting up an inventory part. We're gonna keep the name of the SQ. It's not a subunit of anything. We're not gonna put a manufacturer part number. We're gonna call this a Squire. Squire, Squire, Squire. It's gonna be a Squire, and the cost of it is gonna be a 168. The account that it's going to be go to when we expense it, cost of goods sold, and the preferred vendor is going to be Fender, the preferred vendor. And then we're going to say that the sales price is going to be $244. We do have sales tax on it, so we're going to keep the sales tax on it. And then the income account is going to be an income type account, of course. If you select the drop down, we want to select the merchandise sales for this item, merchandise sales. So we've set this up. You'll notice this screen is just like we would see if we had the drop down lists and set up the new lists there, the list being the inventory list, the item list. So we set up the new item just directly within the purchase order. So we're going to say OK and set up that item. we're just going to buy one of these, and we bought it specifically for a specific customer. The customer came into the store and bought it. Now, the customer field, remember, is not required for the purchase order, because we might have just purchased it to put in the store to sell it at some other point to whoever walks into the store. But this time, we purchased it specifically to a customer, and we want to link that through the rest of the process. So we're going to go and say the customer that we bought it for is new music stuff. So it's going to be new music stuff is not there. So we're going to set up the customer. I'm going to type it in. We're going to say tab. It's going to say, do you want to set up the customer? And we're going to say, yes, we do. And we're just going to simply do it with a quick add rather than the full setup process. Now we're going to actually make another purchase order as well. So before we check this out, we're going to use the save and new option to enter the next purchase order. So we're going to say save and new. And we're like, well, as long as we're filling out purchase orders, we also need some more Epiphone guitars, the ELP, Epiphone Les Paul, which is like our standard kind of guitar. So we're going to order that. That's to our normal type of vendor, or our most used vendor. It's not a new vendor, not Fender, the new vendor, but the Epiphone vendor. So we're going to go to Epiphone, and again, we could type it in here, Epiphone, and then tab through this. And with 2/9, we're going to have the same date, the PO number is generated automatically, which is nice. Then we're going to have the item, which is going to be an ELP, which I could just type in, ELP. There it is. I'm going to tab, and it'll populate for us. We're going to buy 3 of these ELPs, because we just want these in the store. We're not buying these for a particular customer, therefore we're not putting anything in the customer field. It's not going to link through to a particular customer. We just want the guitars to put them in the store. And remember, as we record these, no transaction. We're not going to take a look at the financial statements at all, because this is the one kind of form, or one of the few forms, that don't have any financial transaction. It's tracking what is happening, but not from a financial standpoint, because from a financial standpoint, we have not received inventory, we have not paid anything, we don't owe anything, no financial transaction involved in terms of recording accounts on the financial statements, on the balance sheet, on the profit and loss. So we're simply going to say save and close here. Of course, in the future now, we expect to receive the inventory. We'll receive the inventory typically with a bill, then record that information as we receive it, increasing inventory, increasing the accounts payable, and then of course at some point we will pay the bill with here or with a check, decreasing the accounts payable and decreasing cash.